Thanks for joining us, Lori.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hi, everybody.
Gosh, what a year it's been. I feel
I-
like we were just here last year, but it's also been really long.
It has been a long year and a long January 2020.
Well, we got to go fast, and there's a lot to cover. It's a big state, so let's just dig right in. What are some of the top 2020 Bureau of Cannabis Control regulatory changes to expect? I'm seeing emergency rules about QR codes. I'm wondering if there's anything going to be new in lab testing or coming for retailers or distributors, and certainly I'm hearing a lot about metric, although that might be on the DFA side.
Right, so as most of you know, we just released our emergency regs for the QR code to require retailers to post their QR code to help consumers make informed decisions to make sure they know they're going to a licensed retail shop. So that just got released. We, of course, had some legislation that was passed last year. So we are looking at SB 34, the compassion care. We had to make some changes in metric in order to accommodate that, and all three licensing authorities are working on regulations. So that's going to give folks in the supply chain the ability to donate cannabis to folks that really need it. And so that's coming up really soon, so that's pretty exciting. And then we've been working on a variety of changes, so it really encompasses a lot, but a lot of cleanup changes, looking at the three licensing authorities over the last couple of years. You know, some people have pointed out there's some inconsistencies. So what, for example, CDPH has written doesn't really work when it gets down to distribution. So a lot of that cleanup we're looking at. So I think you're going to see a lot of things coming down more. You know, there's a lot of confusion on ownership. I think how the Bureau looks at ownership is slightly different than the other two. And so all that needs to be cleaned up, because if you're going to apply for a license, it should be fairly consistent between the three licensing authorities.
What legislation is the Bureau of Cannabis Control watching in 2020? I know the governor just released his budget package and talked about a little bit of agency consolidation potentially moving, streamlining taxes. What are you watching? What's salient in this new year?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. Obviously, the streamlining of taxes, I think that's important to everybody. Even when we look at, you know, where the point of collection is going to be, that may change things for the Bureau. But I think you're looking at things like trade samples may pop up again.
Yeah, I love some samples, right? Everybody miss those?
Yeah. So I think we'll be watching things like that. Maybe what's even happening on the hemp front. You know, does that fall under, you know, a regulatory structure? And then, of course, we will be watching how things develop with consolidation. That's probably a big one, right?
Yeah. Just to jump off on consolidation, is there a timeline around that at all? Is this a fast-moving thing or a slow-moving thing? And I mean, that's all relative to the speed of government in general.
Right. I think you are going to see some changes fairly quickly when it comes to really just starting to have a plan of what consolidation is going to look like and what that leadership's going to look like. So we're all, you know, reporting to the same chain of command. I think what's going to take probably anywhere from 12 to 18 months is really, we all are located in different facilities, and really geographically getting everybody in one place or deciding where people are going to be. I think that does take some time. I think anything, I mean, depending, you know, at the state level, I don't know what you consider quick to what we consider quick, but you know, if we get this done in the next 18 months, I think that's a pretty huge accomplishment, and that's fairly quick. And I think the important thing is that the industry, it's smooth with the industry. I mean, there's going to be a lot of work to do within, but as long as we need to still be making sure we're getting those license applications out, that we're answering your questions. So hopefully, as quick as we're moving, the industry isn't affected by it too much.
What are some of your success metrics or goals for 2020 at the Bureau of Cannabis Control?
Wow, that seems to change every year. So, well, I'm going to tell you, I mean, it's pretty exciting. I mean, for us, it's always the priority is making sure people that are qualified to have a license and want a license, we get them licensed. I mean, the more people we can get licensed, working with the local jurisdictions to educate them, making sure we're helping them to approve some of these licenses, and then, you know, enforcement, I think for the next couple of years is going to be a big priority, and making sure we're still have our, foot on the pedal of going after unlicensed activity across the state. Obviously, consolidation is going to be a big priority for us, and I think it's a great opportunity. I think the fact that we're all going to be one agency it just makes sense, and I think in a lot of ways it's combining all of our priorities. I think it's going to be, in a lot of ways, for the folks out in the audience that works with California, it's going to be really nice when you can go to one place for your license search to see who has a license, one place to apply for a license. I think, us streamlining that process and making it more business friendly for the consumer to apply for a license and get information, I think that is going to be the goal for this year, to make sure we do that right, because I think it's important we do that right.
Is the BCC fully staffed up? How's staffing looking this year? I know we got annual licensing going on, and these are two separate questions, but what hiccups can people avoid, common hiccups, can they avoid in annual licensure?
Yeah, so we've staffed up a lot. Within the Bureau, we're close to 100 employees. We are almost fully staffed in our licensing. And really, probably the biggest hiccup we find with people is just a lot of just things like that. When we reach out to folks, a lot of times it takes time to get things back. But I think a lot of people have trouble with the application, maybe what they need to do, maybe not understanding what they need for providing us. And I think the biggest thing I can say is please reach out to us, have that. Everybody here, if you have an application with the Bureau, you're assigned a licensing analyst to work one-on-one with you with your application. If you're having trouble with that application, we want to know, we want to walk you through it. And so I think instead of like anything else, when sometimes you don't understand what you need to do, you tend to put that off.
Oh, yeah.
We all do that. I do that. And I think it's just whatever we need to do to work through that application. The good news is that for the annual application, most of you are getting provisionals. And a lot of times we can get those provisionals out, and then we can slowly work with you to get those annual requirements. So I think it's not going to keep you from doing business. So I would always encourage you, whatever we need for that provisional, get that to us first so we can get you into a provisional, and then we can work on all the rest.
Is there a BCC help phone line? Have you considered doing one of those?
Yeah, that's a good point. So we do have a phone line that can reach directly to our licensing people, and I know you're going to ask me for it right now, and
it's fine. We'll get you it.
We'll get you it, but it's more to your point.
It's gonna be 1-800-BCC license.
Yeah, that's what we do need that. So
right?
we need a vanity number.
I'm stuck.
Yes. We do have that number, but I think I like your idea. We need that vanity number so it's easy to get a hold of us. And with more people, it allows us to be more accessible. And I think we're trying to, not everybody wants to be communicated by phone. Some want email, but some want text. So I think you're going to see us exploring more of, hey, maybe asking you on the application, how do you prefer us communicate to you? So we're making some changes to the application where we're going to ask those questions, so then we know what your preferred method of communication is. I know it's
crazy.
It is. But I think it's good. We're also looking at doing a lot more in the application process, putting little help boxes. We find that there's a lot of things we can head off by just putting those things, and so we're really looking at how that application is online and trying to make some really needed changes to it to make it easier for you, so you don't have to call us up, that you got the answer right there.
Yeah, you need a little clippy that pops up while you're doing it.
Yeah, and those are easy to do.
You're trying to get a distribution license. No. How's your email response times? I got a couple social media questions about I'm having trouble getting an email response back.
Yeah, I'm going to say we're really responsive, especially on the questions that we answer on a regular basis. We got those, right? We even have a database that we house those on our website, which is Your Questions Answered. It's a searchable database. I always say on some of the questions, like unique business models that we get, those do sometimes take longer,
right? Because
we don't know the answer,
right.
And sometimes we have to contact public health and food and ag, because sometimes it involves all three. And so we do, just so you know, we meet every week to talk about email questions we're not sure how to deal with and
You
have a
gotta
consistent.
live blog that.
Yeah, I know.
You guys sitting around being like, this guy wants to run a rental trimmer agency. He doesn't have any pot, but anyway, that's my job.
You guys have creative questions too. They're
What's
not.
some
They're
of the
not
more
easy.
creative ones? Like, ice cream trucks.
Well, there's all sorts of things. You guys have great ideas, and we got to keep up with all those great ideas.
One question people have is, what is the future of lounges? There's certainly a number of consumption lounges. They tend to be locally licensed, and the BCC has seemed to been copacetic with that.
Yeah, really, lounges is more of a local jurisdiction issue, and that is really, if the locals allow a lounge, most of the time there's not going to be an issue with the BCC unless it's violating some sort of regs. But so far, we haven't had any issues with the social consumption lounges that have been issued. There could be some out there that we don't know about that we could have an issue with, but yeah, that's more at the local level, and so
yeah.
You know.
One thing you guys do have is 85 events licensees this year. Can you speak to that licensing space? It seems like there's a lot of them, as it means we're going to have a lot of events this year. What's your read on the event, this awesome events license that no other state has, and California cannabis tourism in general?
Well, I just was at a presentation. I understand Michigan sort of copied
really?
ours. Yeah,
Cool.
so
Ash Bash,
yeah.
Ann Arbor.
I don't
Shout
know
out to
anybody from
Michigan. There you
Michigan.
go.
Supposedly they took what we did. You know, I feel like I hope that we get a lot more temporary events coming up. We had some really big ones last year. You know, we've had Emerald Cup. We also had Grasslands, which was under Alsa. It was huge, and it really went off with no issues at all. And so I think if you go back 2 years when the statute only allowed you to have temporary events on fairgrounds or district agricultural places, and then that got changed to allow for it could be anywhere where the jurisdiction expressly approved, I think we thought there'd be a lot more event licenses, and I don't know that we've seen that, and I think the locals are really trying to figure out where the best place to have these things. So I really am optimistic that we're going to have a lot more of these this year.
What do you tell people who ask, so much of this stuff is local. What's the best way to affect local change that you've seen? Do you have any stories that stick in your mind where locals really changed their environment? I think of people running referendums or taking city council seats. I mentioned that last year.
Yeah, I think all of that at the local level has to come from the constituents of that jurisdiction and really engaging with the local politicians. Though that's that could almost be a full-time job because you have to be on top of that. And so I think also though a lot has to do with they're also struggling with resources. They have a lot of other issues they're dealing with in their jurisdiction, whether, homelessness and housing and all those things. So I think the more you can keep them informed about what's going on with cannabis and the statutes and just keeping them educated is also a really valuable thing. And if you know of like a local jurisdiction that seems to want to do cannabis regulation, but maybe they don't know where to start, we're happy to, if we know, we'll step in and send people there and really talk with them about it, because we want to make sure they get really good information. So if you think there's a jurisdiction out there that's struggling that you think would be valuable for us to talk to, we're happy to do that as well.
I saw for the first time that the League of California Cities, this association of California cities that does a lot of lobbying, they not only have model ban ordinances on their website, but for the first time they have actual model dispensary ordinances. And it struck me that the lack of institutional support over these years has left these bewildered citizens who are in charge of their locality kind of gun-shy about moving forward on a lot of this stuff. Do you see any more institutional support emerging to support locals who, again, remain bewildered and outgunned in terms of the legal innovation required to do a local ordinance?
Well, I think you're seeing, one of the things we did do last year was release the local social equity grants. We awarded $10 million to 10 jurisdictions. There's now GoBiz just announced another round of
Those grants
equity.
are huge.
Yeah, there's close to 30 million, and they're also going to be giving out grants to local jurisdictions that intend to do a social equity program. So I think that's really going to I think you're going to see more local jurisdiction looking at cannabis regulation, looking at social equity programs. So I think you're going to see some of that changing. Also, because we get so many questions from the local jurisdiction, I think people, if you're not from California, you forget we have over 500 different cities and counties that we have to interact with. It's huge.
It's country.
Yeah, and we're finding locals are asking more questions. We're expanding. We have a local liaison unit, and their sole responsibility is just to work with that local jurisdiction, answer their questions. We having a dedicated phone line, so they're not waiting for answers, because we want them to get answers so they can answer you as well. So I think you're going to see, hopefully, I'm trying to be optimistic that that's going to change this year.
How many stores do you think California, new ones, the state might license this year? Well, it's actually state and local. I see the licensee numbers come out every week. I see new stores opening in places that have never had them. I see cannabis commerce coming to places that never even considered medical cannabis commerce. Talking to some experts like Amanda over at CannaRegs, we're guessing that maybe 200 or 300 more stores might join the mix this year. What do you see in that tempo there?
I think that would, I'm hoping that happens. I think when you look at our population and the number of retailers, I mean, really, it's, with the number of, we want people to have access to legal cannabis, and you can't do that when you have pockets of the state where people can't access legal cannabis unless they have to drive several hours. So we want, as a state, right, we want them to be able to access places that have their cannabis tested to make sure they're paying their taxes, their packaging and labeling. And so it's really, I'm hopeful to see increased access at the retail level. And I think that's good for everybody. It's good for your we have more distributors than retailers right now, right?
Right.
So,
And I'm seeing, again, like there's 500 plus cities or counties. Even if 100 of them just do 1 or 2 stores for the first time, it makes a measurable impact considering how many we have going right now. When you look back at 2019, what do you consider the biggest wins of last year? As I recall, you were telling the LA Times that there was not a single confirmed case of exclusive use of a licensed store vape product associated with injuries last year. But yeah, when the clock struck midnight, what were you happy that you got done last year?
Well, obviously the equity grants getting out there and awarding grants, that's pretty incredible. And when you look, as California's the leader on that, and I think you're watching other states take notice of that. So I think that was a huge thing. Enforcement, we increased our enforcement efforts with starting different techniques. We increased how many search warrants we're serving on unlicensed places. We're getting better at our tactics of keeping them closed too, so we're not going in and they're opening up the next day. But we looked at tactics like we sent landlord letters basically warning the property owner, if you're allowing your tenant to continue doing this, we're going to take action against you. So all those, trying to find different tactics and different things to go after the unlicensed market, and then really stepping up our public awareness campaign. That's probably been the biggest thing for us, is really trying to get the word out there to consumers to try to change those habits, to encourage them to go to the legal market and why it's important to go to the legal market, and the QR code. I mean, honestly, I think we've been just trying to attack it at all fronts.
What work do you see is left undone? I think we've touched on a lot of it in this talk so far, but is it just going to be consolidation this year, streamlining licensing? What is the big priorities?
Well, obviously, our stakeholders are always going to be a priority. We want to make and I said this earlier, and I can't say it enough. I mean, you want us to be very nimble when it comes to processing your license applications and getting you licensed and making sure we're responsive to you. But also on the same time, we have to make sure we have the infrastructure to support that. So continue to staff, but consolidation is a big part of that. But I'm pretty confident we can get that done and streamline that. I'm looking forward to, making sure that when you go to you go to one website for all of us. I mean, who wants to go to 3 separate licensing websites to try to figure out what you need to do? So those are some simple things we can do over the next few months that I think is going to make your lives a lot easier.
What is your read on the overall industry health? Certainly, there's been some layoffs and some people who have been bemoaning, the high tax and regulation environment here in California, or the slow speed of local implementation. When you look at the dashboard for the California cannabis industry, the legal side, what is that dashboard reading to you?
I feel like we're speed dating right now so quickly. So I'm always going to be optimistic, because what happens, I don't know. I'll be honest, with cannabis, it surprises me every day. What I think I know, like 2 months ago, I'm like, oh gosh, it changes, and so you gotta roll with the punches. So I'm optimistic that things are going to look up, and I think as long as you're engaged and you keep us in, making sure, I'm going to say, if I ever get asked by any other state what's the most important thing, it is making sure you're working with your stakeholders, you're listening to your stakeholder. I sort of say you got to keep your egos in check as regulators, right? A lot of times we need to just listen. We don't need to always be the ones talking. And as long as we have a relationship where there's that mutual respect, I think we can accomplish a lot of things over the next year.
Couple more questions. One, I don't see Los Angeles adding any new stores this year in the city limits due to issues around licensure there and who gets them and the speed of rollout there. Is the city of LA, which is the biggest market in California and arguably the world, where is the BCC going to help them, or is that really on them to sort out? You stand ready to issue the licenses to who they license.
Well, we stand ready, but at the same time, they don't have an easy process to get through, and so we're always there to help them. They're one of our equity grant recipients, and so we're going to start. And one of the other things you're going to start seeing is us going around the state, looking at doing workshops, licensing workshops, to work with the local jurisdictions and to help our applicants navigate. Having the locals there to help them navigate the local process, then having the state there to have applicants navigate the state process. So as we see some of these equity grants getting awarded, we're going to start stepping in and doing these workshops, and I think it's going to be helpful to a lot of the local jurisdictions. So we're there for any of the locals. I don't feel, I'm not one to just stand back and wait. I think it's up to us to make sure to provide any resources that we have that would assist them.
In LA, a lot of Angelenos are confused as to what's a licensed store and what's not a licensed store. There's a long history of unlicensed operators there, and there's very few licensed ones. The Bureau of Cannabis Control has a licensee lookup tool on its website. Do you know how effective that is? Is it working? Are consumers going there to disambiguate a licensed store from an unlicensed one? What more do you want to do to make sure people know the difference, considering that 80–90% of them, it's their first time ever walking into a dispensary? They don't even know what to expect.
Right. So with our public awareness campaign, we did change the name of our licensing search, so it's capotcheck.com. And hopefully people, it's a lot easier than putting bcc.ca.gov.
And then going to the Excel spreadsheet.
Correct. And so I think we are going to make some more improvements to our licensing search, because you can't search by DBA right now. And so a lot of you don't know the legal name, or you may not even know the license number. So, but then again, that QR code is also important. So we're requiring retailers, they get a QR code when they're issued their license. They can post it out in front of the store. And so if you're a consumer, you can just take your camera, scan it, and it'll tell you all the information you need about that licensee, the owners, whether it's an active license. And so we're hoping that helps consumers, because they can make that decision prior to going into the store. Because, you always have to post your license inside the store, but who wants to go in there and say, hey, by the way, where's your license? I want to scan it.
I've had some women say, I feel super intimidated about
Right.
asking this guy at the front desk,
Yeah.
like, where's your license?
Yeah.
Like, what else?
But I think more
Yeah.
improvements to our license search is to make it that much easier. If you make things hard, people aren't going to use it. So I think it's good what we have, but it can be better.
Similarly to that, we have this legacy of a lot of medical marijuana products in the state, and a continued issue with counterfeit products at these dispensaries. You're rating them and picking them up and seeing the counterfeits. Is there anything on BCC's radar about battling the issue of counterfeits, empowering consumers to be able to tell the difference? I get a lot of people who go, I don't know where this vape card's from, and I don't know how to tell.
Right, and it is even difficult for us to tell what the difference is. Consumers it's hard to tell for us, and even some of our manufacturers. I think we're looking at the industry itself, especially our manufacturers and stuff. How can we label things to help not have so many of these things counterfeited? I mean, and speaking of the QR code, we're already we're seeing labs where they're saying their certificate of analysis are being counterfeited, right? And so now we're even seeing labs voluntarily doing a QR code on that COA that eventually gets to that label, so you can scan that label, it goes right to the COA. So I think the industry's pretty savvy, and I think we're looking to work with the industry to help us with how do we deal with all these counterfeit products. And I think that's something, that's a big thing for this next year.
2 more and then we'll be done. Yeah, we did it. First one is there a better way to verify Bureau of Cannabis Control employees when they do SNAP inspections? Some licensees have wondered, is this a real BCC guy, or is this someone trying to roll me? Because people have gotten rolled in by individuals who are, masquerading as officials now.
Yeah, and we get people that they have fake websites that say the Bureau of Cannabis Control.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we've seen that, and we try to shut those down. So there's all sorts of things. So if our folks go out to a licensed inspection, they are wearing shirts that identify themselves. They also have identification that they are required to show you if asked, and they have to have business cards. So if there's ever something like something doesn't seem right, doesn't feel right, then we would say, hey, you can just call us to verify it, and we will be happy to take that call. But our guys are very professional. They're usually going to come out in at least pairs. And so ask them for their ID, ask them for their business card. Well, there you go. Maybe I don't know, where would the QR code go to, though?
On their wrist. Yeah, no. Lastly, 2/3 of California remains a banned town, so to speak, but delivery can serve pretty much every corner of the state, at least next day, some of these delivery services. Is there anything on the horizon for delivery in 2020? I know you guys don't get involved with the lawsuit that's ongoing, although I will say it doesn't seem like it holds much legal water. But is there any delivery news we need to know about?
Thanks for the support on that. So when it comes to delivery, we have a regulation that says if you're licensed by the Bureau and for delivery, that you can deliver anywhere in California. We are being sued on that, and I know David's going to be upset with me, but because there's a lawsuit, I'm really not allowed to comment on delivery.
But just logistics of delivery, those delivery licenses are out, those guys are rolling. Any delivery regs to note today?
None to note today.
Okay.
If you have some suggestions.
No more, I think people want to lessen the regulation, not add more. I guess that's the one suggestion from everyone. Lastly, the continuing theme I hear from people is, how do we make license easier? How can you help us in 2020, the industry says. They want me to ask you that. So that's the last sort of question to you is like, are we going to make licensing easier? Will you help?
Well, that's a great question. I think, yes, we can make licensing easier. Is there certain things that may always be required that folks don't like? Yes, because that's in the statute. So some things is beyond our control. We certainly, being responsive, making things clearer, making sure we clear up confusion is always a top priority for us. And we do want to help, and I know that it sounds corny to say because you're always like, yeah, right. But truly, we don't want this to be an arduous process for you, and I do feel like for a lot of you, it does seem that way. Well, it is that, not seem, it is that way. And so I think we are, like I told you, we're looking at ways on even our ways that we can be more flexible as well. I think the last couple of years there was a tendency like we're just following everything to the T, and I think the greatest thing that we could do is provide more flexibility especially when we're seeing as businesses changing. And so I think allowing that would be helpful over the next year.
Well, you got a hard, thankless job. Thank you for getting up every morning and doing it. Thanks for joining us here at the International Cannabis Business Conference. Everybody give a warm round of applause to Lori Ajax.